And welcome back, Professor Almeida, jpalmeida.com. That's jpalmeda.com. Welcome to another lecture in my series on critical thinking. And today we're going to critically think about social media. Now, if you aren't familiar with what social media is, then maybe you are familiar with sites like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Reddit. And if you still haven't heard of those sites and you're wondering what social media is, it just basically revolves around the interaction among people where they create, share, or exchange ideas in an online setting. That's what social media is. And today you're going to learn how to critically think about what you see and how you participate on social media. So these are the goals of today's lecture. By the end of this presentation, you should be able to explain how we use social media to follow trends. You will become familiar with ethical uses of technology. You'll understand friendships on social media. You'll become familiar with current ethical issues with social media and how they can interfere with your ability to think critically. We're going to look at fake news. And finally, you're going to use the CRAAP principle to evaluate social media content. I'm trying to keep it PG here, folks. So that's the game plan for this lecture. Now, in recording this video, I wasn't really intending for this to be much of a lecture. If you are taking COSA 2 on ground, this is going to be more of a discussion than a lecture. But I do need to record this for my online class and for my worldwide audience. So we'll do with what we can here. There will be some questions I will be posing for you. And if you need to hit that pause button for any reason, please feel free to do so. If you value what I'm doing here, feel free to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's just get right into it. So let's talk about social media. It isn't going anywhere. It's here. It's 2018. And you'll see this graphic here. This is from a Pew Research study in January 2018. I recorded this video in March, so this is fairly recent. And it shows that a majority of US adults now use Facebook and YouTube. As a matter of fact, 73% of adults and 94% of 18 to 24-year-olds use YouTube. Think about why YouTube is so popular. YouTube is a great place for content creators, for anyone to publish videos like this. I'm reaching a worldwide audience with these lectures. If you want to learn how to do something, you're one search away on YouTube. For example, if you know nothing about Tinkercad, you can do a quick search for Tinkercad and watch a ton of tutorials on that. If you need to create something for tonight's dinner, you can do a quick YouTube search for a recipe. If you need to catch up on the news clips are on YouTube now. And with social media, information travels fast. I just mentioned news. Think about breaking news, things that are going on at this very moment. I'll tell you right now, if something's happening in the neighborhood, the first place I check is Twitter, right? I check Twitter first to see what's going on. And as a matter of fact, even the traditional media outlets, when you walk into an airport lounge or fast food joint, they have CNN on mute or the local news is on mute, and you see that graphic, breaking news. What do you see? You see tweets. You see viral YouTube videos. Even the journalists are turning to YouTube for breaking news. And you can also spot worldwide trends through social media. Speaking of trends, you've probably seen something like this in your periphery. Maybe you've seen it on the back of a bus, at a bus stop bench, maybe on some bag or anywhere out there. And you're wondering what those things are. They are called hashtags. These are essentially searchable keywords And basically, it works like this. You have a pound symbol, and then you have a one-word term, such as hashtags. Now, if you want to search for something like Long Beach, you would put the pound sign and then Long Beach in one word. Now, most social media platforms support hashtags, and because these are searchable keywords, they are a great way to track certain discussions and posts. They can actually increase the exposure of something. If a hashtag becomes popular enough, it is said to be trending or going viral. Now, you don't need to join a social media network to look at hashtags. Take, for example, Twitter, and I'm going to pull up Twitter right here. This is our department Twitter feed at LBCC_COS. So if you're on Twitter and you're not following us, please follow us on Twitter. So this is our feed, and I can search Twitter for anything that's going on. So for instance, if I want to find out what's going on in Long Beach, you can see I put in hashtag Long Beach in one word. Here are the top Twitter posts at the very moment related to Long Beach. You can see there's some videos here. And if I want to see up to the minute tweets, I can just switch to latest, and I can just go right down this feed here. And let's see if we can find some breaking news. Oh, hey, there was a car accident earlier, posted 24 minutes ago. So again, if you want to see what's breaking, Twitter's the place to go. Now, apparently, it's National Puppy Day because this is a trending hashtag right here. So I didn't know today was National Puppy Day. Now I know. So this is how you can use Twitter to search for hashtags. And you can see how breaking news and trends work. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, that's great. I know how to use Twitter. I know how to use Facebook. I'm watching this on YouTube right now. Why should I care about any of this? Well, with social media, as I mentioned, news breaks and propagates. Right? When it comes to breaking news, things that are happening, maybe the local news or the network news hasn't picked up on it yet. Well, fake news propagates too, and you're going to see some examples of that in a moment. And because information travels so fast, we've seen over and over how social media posts, tweets can impact the markets and foreign policy, especially in politics. All it takes is one tweet and the stock market goes crazy, right? Or there's some kind of foreign policy crisis because something got misinterpreted in a tweet, right? Or perhaps you need to go shopping for something. A lot of times when we're shopping for things online, we look at reviews on products and experiences, right? Take, for example, smartphones. If you're in the market to upgrade a smartphone, you're probably reading some phone website or you're watching some YouTube personality. The question then becomes, who are those personalities and can you really trust them? Okay, we're going to get into that in a second. Or how about this? Do you turn to your family and friends when it comes to products and experiences? Do you trust them? Okay, so a lot of times throughout this lecture, I'm going to be posing these questions, and these are things that you should really sit down and think about. Okay, so again, do you trust your family and friends when it comes to product reviews and experiences? Do you trust the people you watch on YouTube when they tell you that, for example, the Samsung Galaxy S9 is the greatest phone ever made by Samsung? So those are some things to think about. So, what if you've never been on social media? I found this news article from March 12th. So again, I recorded this in March, so this is a fairly recent piece. In India, fake news and hoaxes catch fire as millions see YouTube for the first time. What if you've never been on social media? Okay, let's say you're in a developing country. In a lot of developing countries, mobile usage is huge, right? For a lot of people, their first time on the internet is through the smartphone. Okay, and you really have to think about what you see on YouTube. Folks who have never been on YouTube before, they might not be familiar with memes or things that are going on. And remember, anybody can be their own publisher. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about ethics for a second. And I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, how do you define ethics? Okay, take a moment to think about this. Again, you can pause this video if you need to. Answer this question honestly. How do you define ethics? Now, while you're thinking about your definition of ethics, again, I'm not looking for a textbook definition. I want you to think about your own definition of ethics. What's your argument for being an ethical user? And you can see where all of these discussions about arguments come into play now. Remember your premises and conclusions. What's your argument for being an ethical user? And then finally, look at your friends on social media. What about your friends? Think about that for a second. Okay, so again, if you need to pause this video, please feel free to do so. I'm going to keep moving through here. So I have this quiz on digital citizenship. Okay, so I want to take a moment and talk a little bit more about ethics. So I have these 12 situations here, and you'll see that there are 3 columns: ethical, unethical, or crime. Take a moment to go through these 12 items. Figure out if it's an ethical situation, an unethical situation, or if a crime is being committed. And again, come up with your own arguments as to why, for example, a teacher using her computer at school to send email to her friends and family is either ethical or unethical or even a criminal behavior. So think about these situations. What would you say and what would be your arguments? So about those friends, I found this piece here. And this is someone's funeral, and you can see the quote here. He had over 2,000 Facebook friends. I was expecting a bigger turnout, and you'll see that there are only 2 people sitting there. Well, what does that tell you? And with that said, I have another question to ask you. Realistically, how many relationships can you keep in a given amount of time? How many friends do you think you can have in a given amount of time? And I'm using the term friends loosely here. So let's talk more about relationships. Take a moment and guess that. How many friends do you think you can maintain in any period of time? Okay, so depending on the research or depending on what you're reading, that number is maybe around 150 to 200 relationships. Now, think about your true friends, the people that you're willing to lay down your life for. How many friends do you think you have that fit that category? Maybe you can count them on one hand. Okay, so again, something to think about. Well, let's critically think about your friends. Maybe you know your friends on social media and maybe you don't. So how many friends can a person have? And we've said maybe 150 to 200. So what's the trade-off? What happens when you become popular on social media and you're following a lot of people or you have a lot of friends? What does that do to your relationships? Think about your news feeds, right? Think about your Facebook feed, your Instagram feed, your Twitter feed. If you're following so many people, what happens? And then ask yourself, what kind of things should be done to maintain that friendship? And while you're at it, let's think about agendas. Do your friends have agendas? What kind of agendas do they have? What about you? Right? Think about it. Everyone has an agenda. What kind of agendas do your friends have based on what you see on social media? What kind of agenda do you have? And like I said, everyone certainly has an agenda. Now let's critically think about your friends. And when it comes to social media, you have to realize that anyone can publish their thoughts and beliefs. That's the nice thing about being online. everyone is their own publisher. Right now, I'm putting out this video for a worldwide audience, right? It's not just for my COSA 2 classes, but for anyone. Anyone can find this video and watch this lecture. And again, if you like what you see here, if you're getting value out of this, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Now, with that said, when it comes to information, sometimes there's wrong information floating out there. Think of all of the chain letter jokes. Maybe if you have your elders online, they're probably forwarding you old jokes from the 1990s. And sometimes wrong information is not always disinformation. Okay, notice I use the word disinformation. And this is another question I have for you. How do you define disinformation? Okay, so as we were saying, it's not necessarily disinformation that gets spread around. Friends tend to reshare or retweet false information, whether they realize or not. I'm pretty sure I've spread false information at some point unwittingly. And maybe your friends believe in that false information, or maybe they don't. Maybe some of your friends are just doing it to get a reaction. I had this discussion in my on-ground COSA 2 class. I asked about my students' friends on social media, and one of them told me that they thought their friends were being jerks because they tended to post things just to get a reaction out of people. And there are people like that on the internet. They are what are called trolls, and you can see that I have a troll face right here as a graphic. Now, I've mentioned Scott Adams before, and if you don't know who Scott Adams is, he's the creator of the Dilbert comic strip. And, you know, we've talked about the two dimensions in past videos, especially in this current political climate. You have two dimensions, and when we talked about evaluating arguments, we realized that in the informal test of validity is not enough, because sometimes people tend to see two movies on the same screen, to paraphrase or restate what Scott Adams says. And what does Scott Adams mean by two movies on the same screen? What he's saying is that people have their own ideas, they come to their own conclusions, and they might not necessarily be the same thing that they're looking at. Even though it's the same exact thing, they're just arriving to a different conclusion. So with that said, when you're on social media and you're going through your feeds, or again, if you're looking at product reviews, do you really trust your friends' opinions, or are they just trying to get a laugh, maybe at your expense? So this is something you really have to think about when you are looking at information on social media. So I have a couple of videos here, and I'm not going to spend any time on them. You can go and watch these videos, and I'll put the links in the description. This video here concerns the problem with Facebook, and this was something that was published in 2014. Now, this is a channel called Veritasium, and he has a follow-up video after this where he looked at the issue with buying likes and showing how Facebook was being fraudulent when it came to likes. And this is something you also have to critically think about when you see someone's Twitter profile and they have a couple of thousand followers. Are they really followers, or were they followers that were bought? Or maybe you come across someone's post that was liked a couple of hundred times. Were those genuine likes, or did someone pay for those likes? Okay, so you really have to think about what you're looking at. So again, this video was from 2014, but if you were to watch it, you would still think that it was something that was going on today. Now, I also have an interesting TED Talk here. This was from 2017, and this gets a little deeper. Now, when it comes to lecturing on social media, there are so many different moving parts, and you can really go deep down the rabbit hole with some of these things. And I just want to get you to start thinking about what you're looking at when you are participating on social media. And again, this isn't meant to be so much of a lecture, it's more of a discussion, but since I have an online COSA 2 class, I do need to put something up for those folks. So if you're in my online class watching this, you do need to be asking those questions to yourself. And this could be something for your discussion prompts as well. So when you get a chance, watch these videos. Again, I will put the links in the description. And now I want to get you thinking, once you have watched those videos, do the social media platforms have agendas of their own? Okay, does Facebook have their own agenda? Right now in the news, we have this whole thing with Cambridge Analytica. So you can take a moment to Google Facebook Cambridge Analytica. That's currently going on right now as of March 2018. And again, you need to ask yourself if Facebook has an agenda of its own, if Twitter has an agenda of its own, does Google have an agenda? And if those platforms have their own agendas, what happens to critical thinking? Okay, these are questions that you need to be asking yourself. And if you think about it, if you aren't paying for a service, you are essentially the product, right? You've probably seen this online. And again, if you haven't been online, you know, there's a saying that if something is free, you are the product. Now, if you think about it, how do social media platforms make money? Okay, because they're providing this free service, but as you may or may not know, businesses exist to turn a profit. Okay, so you have to think about the agendas of the business models. And a colleague of mine who's also teaching COSA 2 had this great quote: "Your algorithm is an argument." Now, what do you think my colleague means by that? Your algorithm is an argument. Think about everything that you have ever posted about yourself. Okay, so let's step through here. You sign up for a social media platform. Let's say it's Twitter or Facebook or even Instagram, right? You create a profile, you volunteer information about yourself, but let's step back even further. Even before you sign up and start volunteering information, because that's essentially what you're doing, there's a little thing that you have to scroll through and click on to continue. It's called a terms of service, or you could also think of it as an end user license agreement, or a EULA, right? If you're using a computer, you want to use a piece of software, you usually have to agree to a set of terms. Now, I don't know about you, I honestly don't really read those terms of service, and I'm sure 99.9% of everyone else on this planet doesn't read them either, right? So you have the terms of service, and then you volunteer information about yourself, and then you start posting things up, okay? Now think about all of that put together. That is essentially an argument, right? You've created an argument using your own algorithm. Now, if I were to come to you and I printed everything out that you have ever done on the social media platform, and maybe the stack is about this high, right? Maybe it's about this right here. And I put it right in front of you. I said, this is everything I know about you. Now, think about the social media platform itself. They certainly know all these things about you. Do you think they might be tweaking algorithms to affect your news feed or things that you see or may not see? Okay, so I'm going to operate on the assumption that you've paused this video, that you've watched those other videos I referenced, and you really need to think about the things that you're seeing on social media, because certainly the platforms have an agenda. They have advertisers, right? Advertising is a business model. As a matter of fact, when it comes to Google, search is not their #1 source of revenue. It is advertising. Advertising is Google's business model. It certainly is Facebook's business model. And again, a lot of the stuff that you get for free online, it's usually supported by advertising, right? And that leads to my next point about brand safe. Okay, another hot topic that's going on right now when it comes to Twitter. Twitter is filtering hashtags that might not be brand safe to advertisers, or if they feel that it's a threat to their viability as a platform. YouTube is doing the same thing with content creators. They are demonetizing YouTubers who put out videos that aren't necessarily brand safe to advertisers. So if you create a YouTube video, especially if it's a political YouTube video, and you're going against what the platform stands for, and maybe the advertisers aren't too happy about being associated with your brand, then you're going to end up being demonetized. And that really raises some ethical issues about social media itself, because now you have the social media platforms that are essentially manipulating algorithms, manipulating what you see or what you hear, and in some cases effectively censoring things that go against what is brand safe, or things that are against their agendas. And that raises the question, just what is the role of social media? And this is something that you might want to ask yourself, that you might want to put into your discussion. And again, the main question here, how does all of this affect your ability to think critically? Okay, so I have a couple of things to think about here. How is critical thinking affected? Well, for one, these algorithms can shape the arguments, right? Because if the news feed is manipulated in a way where we only see things that we like or that we agree with, we are effectively creating our own echo chambers. And this leads to the tale of two dimensions, right? If you are in an echo chamber, you are only seeing other things that you agree with. You don't see things from the other side. Now, if you want to be a good critical thinker, if you remember all the way back a couple of videos ago, I told you that you have to straddle the universe, right? You have to straddle the universe, and you have to consider all of the sides, including the ones that you don't agree with, and then come to your own conclusion, right? And along with that, this manipulation also interferes with our own identities, because if we are in our own echo chamber, we don't see the other side. That also affects who we are and how we're being branded. Now, there's a couple of other considerations, and again, I want to ask you to think about those considerations, especially if you're in my online COSA 2, and then come up with those considerations in your discussion posts. All right, let's talk fake news. And you'll see that I have this graphic in the corner here, and it shows Russian President Vladimir Putin being photoshopped in. And now you have to think about whether something is true or not. Okay, what's fake news anyway? Fake news, by definition, is untrue information disguised as credible. Now, why do I have this Photoshop piece of Vladimir Putin? It's because the image with Putin was circulating around social media, and it was playing on the whole Trump-Putin collusion meme that's been going around in politics. And this was propagating through social media, when as a matter of fact, the actual image shows an empty seat. So this is an example of fake news here. It's intended to deceive or misinform. And fake news can come in different forms. It can be sensationalized posts, or sensationalized news, memes, or headlines, right? So again, headlines relate to sensationalized news. It's easily spread through social media. Remember how I said that information travels fast on social media? So this is great for fake news. Why do people put out fake news anyway? Okay, you're probably thinking to yourself, why do people do this? Again, there are people out there who like to troll, who like to get a rise out of people. So if they spread this image with supposedly President Trump and President Putin talking together, that's going to get a rise out of a certain segment of people. But, besides that, some people have agendas, right? And they want to be able to further them. And the sites that spread sensationalized news. Maybe it's to drive clicks to get you to go to their website, and a lot of times when you go to their website you start to see ads, and therefore those sites benefit from revenues from those advertisements. So you can see that there is a reason for you to fall for fake news, and there's ways that different entities capitalize on fake news, because again, it's to further agendas, it's to drive clicks to those websites and then get ad revenue from them. And here's an example of fake news. Okay, in March 2018 there was an armed robbery attempt at the Glendale Galleria, and hashtag Glendale Galleria started trending both on Reddit and Twitter. And you'll see that I've pulled a couple of posts from Reddit and Twitter. Can you notice the difference here? Okay, so here on Reddit, shooter at Glendale Galleria. There's a report of an active shooter at Glendale Galleria and people are down, right? And then here's someone on Twitter. Hey, ABC7 and KCAL CBS2, there's an active shooter at Glendale Galleria. And then there's another tweet, no, it's not an active shooter. Others report a smash and grab, blah, blah, blah. And then here's Venice311 saying, per the scanner, Glendale Galleria mall shooting may have been an attempted robbery and the gunshots came from the mall security. And then there's this tweet here. We're thankful that everybody at the Glendale Gallery is okay, but scares like this shouldn't happen anymore. We need common sense gun reform now. And then hashtag for March for Our Lives. So you can see already that there were certain entities that were trying to further their own agendas using hashtag Glendale Galleria. Now for comparison, here are two more tweets. Here's so-called breaking news at News Alert headquarters. Breaking news. Active shooter situation at the Glendale Galleria Mall in California. Do not enter the mall. Please retweet and share to spread the word. I hope you like my exaggerated voice there. Meanwhile, from the city of Glendale, and you notice there's this little blue check mark here. This is what's called a verified user on Twitter. Usually celebrities and certain entities, they get this little blue check mark. But again, this is something that you have to critically think about, because there are some people that have had their blue check marks removed because they weren't playing by Twitter's rules. So again, this is something you have to think about. Just because you see that blue check mark, does that automatically mean that they are credible? But anyway, here's the city of Glendale. Report of a robbery at the Glendale Galleria. Report of a shot fired. No one hurt. Glendale police have the situation under control. Now, notice the timestamps here. Situation under control at 3:20 p.m. But then 12 minutes later, active shooter. Do not enter the mall. Okay, this is fake news right here. Okay, so what are the impacts of fake news? Well, number one, fake news wastes bandwidth, right? Because you're downloading that data unnecessarily, and also it distracts from the real issues, from what's going on. And as a matter of fact, fake news can cause real-world consequences. In this case, with personal safety. Because if you do a hashtag search for Glendale Galleria and look back to March 10, 2018, you'll see that there are a lot of tweets where people were asking questions, and they were rightfully fearful because there was a lot of fake news going around about an active shooter that really didn't happen. Right? And not just with personal safety, but again, tweets can affect the stock market and foreign policy. Now, with all that said, how do we evaluate whether something on social media is fake? Okay, so again, if you need to pause this video, please feel free to do so. And let's talk about social media evaluation. And we have what's called the CRAP principle, or CRAAP. Yes, this really does exist. And it can be broken down to these 5 words: currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. This is the same principle we're going to use when we get into evaluating websites, much in the same way that we're going to be doing with social media posts. So you might as well learn about the CRAP principle now. And let's start with currency. And I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, again, how many of you turn to social media for breaking news, right? We've talked about how information travels fast, but a lot of times, again, if something's going on in a mall, let's say Glendale Galleria, how many of you turn to Twitter or to other places to look for breaking news? I know I was checking Reddit, I was looking at Twitter, and the news media haven't caught on to it just yet at the time. Again, how many of you look to social media for breaking news? Now, when it comes to currency of something on social media, what does the research say? And this is where you really have to put your thinking cap on and do your homework on certain things. Because a lot of times when it comes to social media, and especially when you are watching traditional media, we've had that Zen TV experiment. TV and to an extent, social media lives for the moment. Okay, when you think about Twitter, you're looking at what's going on at that very moment in your Twitter feed. A lot of times we don't go back and search for something on Twitter from what was said way back when, unless you're there to, call out someone, especially if you have an agenda, right? So what does the research say? And as I've been saying, even the traditional mainstream media, they turn to social media for breaking news. So that's currency. Let's look at relevance. How relevant are the posts or discussions to you? Now, I want to talk about fake accounts because this is a very relevant issue on social media. If you see someone with a couple of thousand followers, how many of those followers are genuine and how many of those are either fake accounts or what are called bots? Okay, you really have to think about that. Let's also look at hashtag spam. Now, in doing my previous search on Long Beach, you might have seen a tweet or two where it had nothing to do whatsoever with Long Beach. Someone was using that hashtag to spam for their own service or product, or maybe they have their own agenda. And finally, you have what are called sponsored posts. If you watched the Facebook video I mentioned earlier, you saw that people can buy likes on Facebook or pay to promote their posts. So companies and other entities, they pay the social media platforms to boost their posts up so that you can see them above the posts from the people that you follow or your friends. Okay, and sometimes, as you'll see later on when we get into websites, there might be sponsored posts that look like actual news pieces or articles. Now, you also need to think about how and if social media posts shape your opinions, whether it has to do with current events that are going on and also product reviews, right? If you're shopping for something, you're making a major purchase, you want to know what other people say, maybe those posts are relevant, maybe they're not. So you need to look into those things. Again, like I said, the format of this video, this is more of a discussion to get you thinking about things. It's more of that instead of a traditional lecture. Now, let's look at authority. Going back to my example here between breaking news headquarters and the city of Glendale. Now, when it comes to social media, anyone can be a publisher. And looking at these two tweets here, you have to ask yourself, who is more credible? And more importantly, how would you look into someone's credibility? Who is this News Alert headquarters? Who are they? And you can see here, this tweet right here, it was reshared 19 times, 8 likes, right? So certainly there are people out there who are spreading this. How would you look into someone's credibility? How could you find out who this breaking news headquarters is? And then how would you find out who the city of Glendale is? Okay, I know it may seem like a simple question, but this is something you need to think about in order to establish authority. Accuracy. I have this great quote here from Denzel Washington on the media. And here's what he said about the media. In our society, now it's just first. Who cares? Get it out there. We don't care who it hurts. We don't care who we destroy. We don't care if it's true. And a lot of times when you're looking at social media, when you're watching 24-hour news, You know, it seems like these days it's a rush to see who is first to break that information, like it's some kind of popularity contest. And Denzel Washington has a point here. So you really need to think about the accuracy of what you are seeing. And again, it requires you doing some homework, including maybe doing a Google search on something. And you need to really think about whether something happened. When it comes to March 10th with the Glendale Galleria, there was no active shooter, right? It was an armed robbery attempt. But there were a lot of tweets, a lot of posts about an active shooter situation. Did it really happen, right? So you need to think about phony observations like that. You need to think about phony reviews. If you go onto Amazon, if you're watching a YouTube review, right? Is it a real review or was it sponsored? Did someone pay that YouTuber to give a glowing review of that product, right? You also need to think about phony multimedia, right? Take, for example, that Photoshop of President Trump and President Putin. You also need to think about green screens, right? How about reenactments? These are things you need to consider, and that leads into this next point here on what's called deep fakes. This is something that's going on right now, and you're probably wondering, what are these deep fakes? Well, it turns out you can take a piece of video, superimpose someone onto that video to make it seem like they were doing something, and this has wide-reaching ramifications. If you want to blackmail someone, if you want to put someone in a bad light, or if you want to make it seem like somebody did something really great when it turns out they didn't do it, the technology is there to do it. And this will have a lot of consequences, and you're really going to have to think about whether something really happened at all. So this is something that's going on right now, and there's a lot of debate about it. Finally, you need to think about the purpose. What's the purpose of the social media account that you're looking at? Whether it's an entity, whether it's your own social media account. Who is your audience? That's the first thing you need to ask yourself. When you go on social media, you need to think about the platforms that you're on. So for example, if you're using LinkedIn, who's your audience on LinkedIn? What's LinkedIn usually used for? Well, if you think about it, LinkedIn is a professional network, right? So who is your target audience? Your audience is going to be other professionals. If you're on Twitter, why'd you create that Twitter account? Who is your audience there, right? If you're on Facebook, who's the audience? It's most likely it's the people you know, right? And with that said, what's their agenda? Why are those people on those platforms? Are they there to get more likes? Are they trying to get more subscribers? And speaking of subscribers, if you like this lecture, feel free to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Is there someone to push a narrative, right? Everyone has an agenda. Even I have an agenda, and you really have to think about even the things I'm telling you, because this is a critical thinking class. I'm not trying to tell you how to think. I want to get you to start thinking. And finally, can that person or that entity really be contacted? Think about that. Breaking news headquarters. Is there someone behind that account? Can you really contact them, or is it a bot? Is it several people behind that account? Okay, so you need to ask yourself those questions. Now, when it comes to arguments, if you really think about it, the principles that you have learned, they're the same. We're just changing the medium here. And if you've watched my previous critical thinking videos, remember we've talked about those indicators. You still want to watch for those. You want to determine the validity of arguments. And here's an exercise for you. Find two perspectives on social media and be able to determine the validity of those arguments. Okay, so that's your exercise. And for those of you who are watching this in my COSA 2, you have a discussion prompt, and I want you to consider these questions. What kind of arguments have you participated in on social media, or maybe arguments where you've been lurking, you've been sitting back and watching? Have you encountered fake news? And based on what you've learned here, how will your consumption habits change or not? So again, these are things to think about. And that concludes this lecture on critically thinking about social media. I hope you have gotten something out of this video. And if you did get something out of this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.